Christmas morning, she walked into my living room like it was her stage, wearing red like a villain who thought she was the heroine. Behind her, David, her work husband, waltzed in like he owned the place. The man once asked me if he could borrow my golf clubs. Now he's smirking in my foyer while my wife holds a gift bag and divorce papers like it's some twisted game of Secret Santa. Morning, she chirped, falsely bright. Merry Christmas. I glanced up from the fire. I already knew. The tension in her jaw, the smug angle of David's chin, the extra cologne. It wasn't even subtle. It hadn't been for months. Then she handed me the envelope. Thick, professionally printed tabs. David leaned closer, grinning. Time to pay up, he said, with that smirk that made you want to test gravity using his teeth. I took the papers. Read exactly 3 words. Dissolution of marriage. My pen was already uncapped. I signed the first page, flipped to the last, signed again. Calm, deliberate, quiet. She blinked. David frowned. That wasn't the reaction they expected. I stood and walked to the fireplace mantel. Picked up a small box, about the size of a jewelry case. Silver wrapping. Red ribbon. I turned and offered it to her attorney, who was seated awkwardly at the edge of my couch, already regretting being there. I got you something too, I said. He hesitated. Opened it. Inside, one folded document. Not flashy. No cover letter. No threats. Just a date-stamped sheet of legal paper with 4 signatures and 1 line highlighted in yellow. The man's face blanched like he'd just watched a slow-motion car crash and realized he was in the passenger seat. He leaned toward her, voice trembling. You need to start begging. Now. Her head whipped toward him. What? Are you serious? His hand was already shaking. Where did he get this? I smiled, but didn't answer. Because how I got it didn't matter. It existed, and it was valid. A clause buried deep in the partnership agreement her father had co-authored when her startup was still begging banks for seed money. Clause 7.3, limited partner override, signed by the silent investor, her own father. It was never removed, never updated, just sitting there, waiting, until now. And now that she had appointed David as interim COO, after ethics concerns, no less, her signature triggered automatic review and succession vote. She had no idea what she'd signed. Or maybe she thought the clause was just legal furniture, something to decorate the document, not burn her career to ash. David looked confused. What the hell's going on? I looked him dead in the eye. I wonder how many more work meetings you have scheduled at the Marriott downtown. Room 912, right? Same as last Friday. He flinched. She looked like someone had slapped her with an open file cabinet. This is the part where most men raise their voice. Flip the table. Cry. Punch. Beg. Not me. See, I'd already done the math. Years ago, I knew the moment David started showing up in our stories. Her jokes at dinner had his name in them more than mine. She kept calling him her twin. Then it became partner. Then my other half. At some point I stopped correcting her. I just started collecting. Now, while you're here, if you're listening this far and you're not subscribed, maybe fix that. Because apparently over 90% of you don't subscribe even though you're binging the whole story. And honestly, the team behind this, they thrive on that support. Every click helps us bring you stories exactly like this one. The kind that don't blink, don't stutter, and definitely don't forgive. Anyway, the lawyer reached for his phone. I raised a brow. You think calling someone will unsign a contract your client already activated? He dropped it like it was hot coal. She tried to snatch the document. He pulled it back. You can't do this, she hissed. No, I said. You already did. David tried to interject. Look, maybe we all. I cut him off. Did you expense the wine? Or the hotel? He blinked. What? Because I got the corporate card's quarterly summary. And the internal audit logs. I just want to know which line item you put it under. Client development or personal moron expenses. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I stepped aside. Enjoy your Christmas. And then I walked out. Let them sit in the quiet. The fire crackled behind them. And the fuse I'd been lighting for months? It had just reached the box marked succession clause. She scoffed the way people do when they're pretending not to hear a fire alarm. A little too loud. A little too quick. He's bluffing, she said, eyes flicking to David, who offered a crooked smirk back like this was just one more awkward team-building exercise. He probably printed it himself. Her lawyer didn't answer. He wasn't smirking. He was hunched forward, knuckles white around the paper. His eyes darted over the text as if reading faster would erase the words already etched in ink. Where did you get this? He asked, voice brittle. I shrugged, pouring myself a splash of scotch. Doesn't matter. It's signed. Yours is one of the signatures, if you're curious. Page 3. That's when he flipped to it. His eyes locked on something and just stayed there. Clause 7.3. It wasn't buried. It wasn't hidden. It was highlighted in the original filing. Yellow, faded slightly, but still visible. Any officer promoted within a reporting line where a conflict of interest has been documented shall be subject to immediate vote of succession. All parties forfeiting decision rights during the breach period. That's the official language. The real meaning? If you sleep with your subordinate and promote him anyway, and your father is a silent partner with override rights, you just gave your crown away. Silently. Months ago, the moment she signed David's promotion memo, the clock started ticking. And I was just the guy holding the stopwatch. The thing about ethics investigations is they don't vanish. They just sit. Quiet. Especially if the original accuser disappears with a settlement and an airtight NDA. Which is exactly what happened with the junior designer who left last quarter after a hostile environment complaint involving, you guessed it, David. That complaint went straight to the ethics subcommittee. And while my wife signed off on David's shiny new title, the ethics log still had his name flagged. Yellow tagged. Under review. Promotion plus conflict plus family interest equals clause 7.3. She gave her father, who, again, owns 37% of her company, a legal bat, and begged him to swing. And I just handed him the ball. David glanced at the lawyer. Wait, are you saying this thing is real? His voice cracked a little on real, and I enjoyed that. She looked back and forth between us, then at the lawyer. You told me this clause was obsolete. He didn't answer. She leaned in. You said it would be struck from the next shareholder round. It was never struck, I said. But I admire the confidence it took to hand your dad the legal equivalent of a guillotine and then dance under it in heels. David's face drained. Why would her dad sign that? Now that was a better question. And the answer was simple. Her father didn't like me. But he respected me. A rare distinction. More importantly, he hated public embarrassment. He believed in family businesses the way some people believe in bloodlines. And watching his daughter parade her affair like a damn TED Talk, that was enough to make even a silent partner start talking. Especially when he saw the photos. Especially when he read the transcripts. Especially when he learned David accessed a client pipeline from her credentials to reassign a contract under his own name. Oh yeah, I had that too. So while she rolled her eyes and prepared her little Christmas theater, her father was reading the ethics report I'd quietly handed him in his study. Alone, glass of brandy in one hand, pen in the other. He signed the override clause, then handed me the original. Use it if she ever forgets who built this, he said. She forgot. And I didn't. David shifted uncomfortably. Can't we, fight this? The lawyer stood. He didn't look at them, just gathered his papers slowly. You can try, he said. But the vote has to happen. And from what I've heard, the board's already convening. He looked at me, not with anger, with respect, and maybe a little fear. You're not bluffing, he said. I raised my glass. Merry Christmas. He left without another word. My wife stared after him. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the realization that she hadn't been outplayed. She'd signed a loss herself. David, still behind her, whispered, I thought you said your dad wouldn't care. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because we both knew. Her father cared a lot. Especially about legacy. And he had just made sure hers ended in parentheses. 3 months before Christmas, I found myself standing in a study lined with books nobody had touched in years, facing a man who once told me, You're smart, but you weren't born smart. My father-in-law, Martin Holcroft, silent majority investor, self-made. If you ignore the 2 trust funds he started with. We had never liked each other. Respect? Maybe. Affection? Not even in theory. My handshake was always too firm for his taste, my tone too flat. He didn't approve of how I dressed, how I spoke, or how I refused to play the son-in-law game. But there was one thing Martin Holcroft respected above all else. Order. Clean lines. Signed contracts. No drama. So when I handed him a folder of photographs, emails, keycard logs, and receipts, time-stamped, cataloged, and cross-referenced to the minute, he didn't huff. Didn't raise his voice. Just poured 2 fingers of scotch, slid 1 glass across the table, and sat down. I didn't drink mine. He leafed through the contents silently, page by page, expression unreadable, occasionally pausing, once to frown, once to smirk, and once, when he reached a text where his daughter called me, the old engine still humming along, to sigh. She's gotten sloppy, he muttered, folding the papers back into the folder. And sentimental. I think the word is entitled, I replied. He didn't argue. Instead, he opened the bottom drawer of his desk, pulled out a battered manila envelope and dropped it in front of me. It was thick, yellowed at the edges, the flap sealed with a red wax sticker bearing the company's founding seal, two hawks flanking a torch. "I never showed this to her," he said. "What is it?" "Clause she doesn't know about. Succession trigger. Drafted it when she made David head of sales last year. I had a feeling. Then why not use it?" He met my eyes for the first time that evening. Because she hadn't humiliated the family yet. She just insulted me privately. I can live with insults. But disgrace. He pushed the envelope toward me. "Deliver it," he said, "if she tries to gut this family publicly." Not a second before. I picked it up. It felt heavier than it looked. "I'm not your soldier," I said. He leaned back, swirling the last of his drink. "No," he said. "You're something far more dangerous than that." And that was it. No handshake. No bonding moment. Just a cold transaction between two men who didn't particularly like each other, but understood the value of consequence. I took the envelope home and placed it in a fireproof box, behind the title to the house and a photograph of my son from his first soccer game. I didn't look at it again. Not until Christmas morning. You don't plan revenge for the sake of drama. That's what they never understand. Real revenge is logistics. Quiet logistics. You build the scaffolding. You wait. You watch them hand you the rope. Then you let gravity do what it does best. And when she walked into my living room in red lipstick and betrayal, dragging her smug little lapdog behind her, smiling like she'd just finished the greatest punchline ever told, I didn't need to react. Because 3 months earlier, her father had already laughed last. And I'd been sitting on the delivery ever since. The automatic doors of Hallcroft Dynamics hissed open at 1:37 p.m. She didn't even pause at reception, just stormed past like panic had a clearance badge. Her heels hit the tile like gunshots. 4 executives in the hallway pretended not to see her. One turned abruptly into the break room, phone suddenly glued to his ear. She was already pulling up the company's bylaws on her phone, scrolling with shaking fingers, searching for some loophole. Succession clause. Her father's handwriting. She hadn't seen it since. God. Since her first investor deck. That clause was symbolic. Decorative. Like an old family crest no one polishes anymore. Now it was on fire. She hit the top floor. The executive boardroom loomed ahead, glass walls cold and quiet. The oak double doors were already closed, but not locked. She didn't knock. Inside, 12 men and women sat around a long, stone gray table. No laptops. No coffees. Just folders in front of each of them. Neat. Intentional. At the far end of the table, her father. Not a word. He didn't even glance at her. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to shout, maybe to demand. But the chair of compliance cleared her throat before a single syllable escaped. "We're in session," the chair said flatly. "Please take a seat." Her mouth closed. She sat. The folder in front of her had one page visible. A single line highlighted. Clause 7.3, triggered by internal ethics conflict and direct line promotion. She went cold. The chair adjusted her glasses, reading aloud. Per the override clause filed and sealed by silent partner Hallcroft and ratified in Q2 of last year. The appointment of any executive officer with a pending internal ethics complaint, if co-signed by a related party, constitutes grounds for immediate succession review. Due diligence shows that the co-signer, Ms. Hallcroft, approved the promotion of Mr. David Hess while such a complaint was pending and without full board consultation. She wanted to say it wasn't active, that the complaint had been resolved, but the complaint hadn't been closed, just paid off, quietly, and now it wasn't quiet anymore. The chair continued. Per legal review, the clause is binding, has been previously ratified, and meets quorum standards. As such, we now invoke a succession vote. She turned to her father. He still hadn't looked at her. The chair spoke again, calm and practiced. We will now nominate a successor to assume interim COO responsibilities. The nominee, she paused and glanced down, is Mr. Calvin Rowe. Her jaw tightened. Calvin, the compliance director. The most boring, painfully ethical man alive. She once called him a sentient clipboard during an off-site. To his face, David had been grooming him for a quiet exit. Now he was taking David's seat. No objections? The chair asked. Silence. She tried. Wait. All in favor. The chair pressed, ignoring her. 12 hands went up, including her father's. Unanimous. The gavel hit the table once. Succession triggered. David was out. She. Suspended, pending compliance review. Access frozen. Executive privileges revoked. Pay paused until review completion. The clause was brutal in its wording. Clinical. Like an obituary written by a lawyer. A page slid in front of her. She stared at it. Sign here to acknowledge receipt, the chair said. This is not an admission of wrongdoing. Only confirmation that the vote has occurred. She looked to her father, finally. He was sipping his water. Still hadn't looked at her. But the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Just gravity, pulling everything back where it belonged. She signed, then stood. No one told her to leave. She just knew. As she exited, she passed David in the hallway. He looked confused. Did you stop it? She didn't answer. And he didn't ask again. Because by then, he was already reaching for his keycard. And it didn't beep anymore. The sun was just beginning to dip when she pulled into the driveway. Cold air, thin and sharp, clung to the pines lining the edge of the property. She hit the remote on her visor. The gate didn't budge. No beep. No whir. Just silence. She hit it again. Nothing. Then a message popped up on her car's screen. Access denied. Code invalid. Her hand hovered in midair for a second longer than it should have, like her brain couldn't process a world where her code didn't work. She reversed. Parked outside the gate. Walked. The path to the front door was cleared, salted, efficient, sterile, like someone had taken care of it for guests, just not for her. The porch lights clicked on as she approached, motion sensors triggered by her presence. They felt accusatory. On the welcome mat, a box. Nothing sentimental. No jewelry. No letters. Not even a toothbrush. Just a few clothes, some travel-sized toiletries, and a broken frame containing a photo of the three of them. Her, him, and their son, at a fall carnival 6 years ago. She was mid-laugh in the photo. He was already looking away. Taped to the door, one envelope. White. Sealed with a single piece of blue tape, the kind you'd use for painting trim. Her name, block letters. No dear. No warmth. She opened it. Inside, a copy of the prenuptial agreement. Not the one her lawyer reviewed before the wedding. This version was annotated. Yellow highlights. Margin notes. Stickers like it had been studied. Taught. Her amendments were circled. She'd forgotten how many clauses she pushed for, how hard she fought to include them. So proud of her foresight. Clause 12. See, in the event of extramarital activity confirmed by independent evidence, primary residence rights revert to the uninvolved party. Clause 14. Any marital asset contributed by inheritance or pre-existing trust shall not be subject to division unless co-signed ownership is documented. Clause 17. If infidelity is proven, the involved party forfeits any residual claim to estate disbursements tied to family-held business equity. Back then, she'd insisted. I just want to protect what I'm bringing in. It's fair. He had nodded. Signed. Never argued. She never thought they'd be used against her. But there it was, bottom of the page, a handwritten note. His. Photos enclosed. Dates included. Witness list appended. She flipped through the packet. Hotel receipts. Surveillance timestamps. Her text thread with David printed out. Key messages highlighted. One in particular, he won't fight. He never fights. That's what makes it easy. Next page, a notarized form. Filed. Effective immediately. Her breath caught. She dropped the papers. Clutched the door handle. It didn't turn. She rang the bell. Nothing. Rang again. Knocked. Pounded. The house didn't answer. Through the frosted glass, she could barely make out the hallway, the edge of the staircase, the corner of a rug. Familiar and now foreign. It looked like a museum display. The home was gone. All that was left was property, and none of it was hers. She fumbled with her phone. Called him. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Still nothing. Tried their son. No answer. Her legs gave out. She sat on the porch step, the cold seeping into her bones, into her skin, like punishment. She stared at the box beside her. Then the door. Then the blue tape. It had always been there. In the contracts. The forms. The files she barely skimmed while smiling across the dinner table. He hadn't trapped her. She'd drawn the blueprint herself. And all he did was follow instructions. By morning, the silence was no longer confined to the house. It was everywhere. She sat cross-legged on a hotel bed, comforter pushed aside, cell phone glowing like a lifeline that wouldn't hold. She scrolled through her contacts, thumb hovering over names that used to mean something. Old brunch groups, co-workers she'd mentored, high school friends she'd never unfriended. Call. No answer. Call. Voicemail. Call. This number is no longer accepting calls. Even her sister didn't pick up. That one stung. They used to talk every Sunday, wine glass in hand, venting about husbands. The irony made her gag. She finally got one. Madison, college roommate. Worked in private wealth management now. The kind of person who always sounded like she was mid-latte. Hey, she breathed. Thank God someone picked up. There was a pause. Then Madison spoke, measured. I heard about the vote. She tried to sound casual. Oh yeah? It's being handled. Another pause. Longer this time. You should know, Madison said quietly. Your emails are going around. Internal ones. From your company's servers. Her heart twisted. What do you mean? I mean forwarded. Shared. Leaked. There's a chain thread. A long one. That's illegal. That's HR's problem now. But, I thought you should see this. A message pinged her inbox. Subject line, just so you're aware. She opened it. A screenshot. At the top, her name. David's name. The subject line, the blueprint. It was a Slack thread. Private. Archived, but not deleted. She read it once. Then again. Her skin went cold. David, he's harmless. Been watching him for years. Man barely reacts to thunder. Her, exactly. That's why it'll work. He never pushes back. He's too old school. Just signs and disappears. David. So we're still good to gut the estate before Q4? Her. Already prepping the filings. He won't even notice till his keycard stops working. Beneath that, someone had highlighted her message. Using the old man's passivity is the only thing that's made this bearable. She dropped the phone. The old man. Her husband. She hadn't written that to be cruel. Not intentionally. It was a joke. A vent. But jokes don't get forgotten. Especially when they age like milk and leak in corporate email audits. She tried another friend. Megan, from the yoga group. Straight to voicemail. Then Shannon, her PR director. They used to meet twice a week for drinks, gossip, and brand strategy. Shannon picked up. There was no hello. Why didn't you tell me you were planning a succession shuffle? Shannon asked. I wasn't. It was personal. Yeah, and now it's public. You dragged David into C-suite without even cleaning up the ethics complaint, and now I'm being asked if I knew. I didn't think it would activate. Shannon cut her off. You didn't think. At all. We've all worked too hard to build something solid. And now your personal mess is our liability. I have to go. Click. The line went dead. She stared at her phone like it had betrayed her. But it hadn't. It was just the messenger. They weren't ghosting her. They were distancing themselves, strategically, professionally. And suddenly it hit her. He never fought. He never argued. He just documented. Every card they played, he cataloged. Every whisper she and David sent through Slack, he waited for them to hit send. He let them write the script, cast themselves as villains, and rehearse every arrogant line. He didn't expose her. He just turned on the lights. And now, the audience was walking out. The call came just before noon, right when she'd convinced herself there was still something to salvage. She was sitting at the little marble table in the hotel suite kitchenette, nursing a third cup of burnt lobby coffee, half dressed in yesterday's blouse. The TV was on mute. News anchors in red sweaters were grinning through holiday segments like her life wasn't disintegrating at 72 frames per second. Her phone rang. Finally, her lawyer, Quentin Banks. Polished, expensive, and, until 24 hours ago, confident that she held the upper hand. He once told her during a contract renegotiation, the courtroom isn't about truth. It's about narrative. And I write better stories. So she answered, expecting strategy. Instead, she got silence. Quentin, she said. He sighed. It wasn't performative. It was real. Waited. I can't represent you anymore. The words didn't register. Not at first. Excuse me. I'm terminating our agreement. Her voice snapped to high alert. On what grounds? Another pause. Conflict of interest. That's not legal grounds. You're under contract. And I'm invoking Clause 5C. Termination upon discovery of unreconcilable material misrepresentation by client. She blinked. What misrepresentation? I read the full packet, he said, voice tighter now. The trustee documents. The estate transfers. The communications you sent on company time. The compliance reports. The prenup you forced him to sign, annotated with your own handwriting. The Slack threads. The memo about gutting the estate. That was private. No, he corrected. It was discoverable. Her hands curled into fists. You said I had leverage. I said that before I saw this, he replied calmly. You had leverage. What you have now is the beautifully assembled, elegantly executed self-sabotage campaign. He didn't win. You gave him everything. She stood, pacing the length of the suite. So that's it. You walk. I'm protecting myself, he said. If I stay on, I risk being named in a discovery motion. He's got counsel already, doesn't he? She said nothing. Thought so, he continued. You think I don't know who he hired? He's got Lawrence Finch. She froze. Finch was a corporate litigator with a reputation for dissecting opponents like a surgeon with an old grudge. The man wore courtroom victories like neckties. Her stomach flipped. Quentin, wait. You know me. We've done deals together. I do know you. That's the problem. And I should have known better than to take this case without reading the full file first. You're abandoning me. No, he said. You abandoned yourself months ago. You just didn't notice. He hung up. No goodbye. No referral. Just the soft finality of a call ending. And then, silence again. She sat back down, staring at the untouched folder on the table. The same one she'd been avoiding opening. She reached for it now, like maybe if she saw it with her own eyes, it wouldn't feel so damning. It was worse than she remembered. Every page detailed something she'd handed him willingly. Texts, receipts, email timestamps, Slack threads, conference badge scans. There was even a footnote from an auditor stating David's promotion was pushed through under a high-urgency override by co-founder Hallcroft, against recommendations from compliance. Her own override. Her own name. Her own digital trail. This wasn't a leak. This was a controlled detonation. And her lawyer had taken one look and run. She set the folder down and stared at the window. Outside, families bustled through the street in coats and scarves. Laughter carried through the cold. Kids chasing each other with snowballs. Inside, she sat, perfectly still, like a house already condemned. Not by fire, but by the quiet knowledge that every support beam had been sawed through long before the collapse. And she'd handed over the saw. The courthouse was quieter than she expected. That eerie, institutional silence where even footsteps seem embarrassed to echo. She didn't wait in line, didn't check her reflection in the glass door. She stormed straight to the records window like urgency could override process. The clerk behind the glass was young, but not naive. He'd seen this expression before. Women, men, couples clinging to whatever was left after the truth came unglued. He didn't blink. I need to file an emergency injunction, she said, slapping a stack of forms on the counter. He looked up slowly. Property or custody? Property. Marital home. I was just locked out. He nodded. Name. She gave it. Your husband's. Ex-husband, she corrected. Or soon to be. He typed. Eyes scanning the monitor. Address, he asked. She gave that too. More typing. Then he stopped. Tilted his head. I see the house, he said. But, your name's not on the title. She blinked. It's our house. It's not listed as joint ownership. We lived there for 9 years. He looked again. Original deed filed in 1989. Transferred via living trust in 2004 to the current title holder. That's your husband. No, 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 she said, pulse spiking. We did a refi together in 2015. He needed my signature. He clicked into the scanned documents. Pulled up a PDF. Rotated the monitor. Right. And here's the disclaimer deed you signed. It expedited the lien. You waived any ownership claim to avoid retitling delays. She stared at the screen. Her own signature. Loopy, confident. She remembered that day. Their son had a fever. They were rushing. The notary had said, just sign here, and we'll finalize by lunch. It hadn't seemed important. She leaned in, voice low. But we were married. That should count. He looked at her, patient but firm. You can't retroactively claim title just because you live there. Not in this state. No joint tenancy, no community property provision on file, and the trust predates your marriage. She swallowed. He can't just lock me out. He slid a pamphlet through the opening. You can challenge it. But to be clear, ma'am, he tapped the deed with his pen. Legally, you were never an owner. The word never hit like a metal door closing. She stepped back. She wanted to yell, scream, tell him he was wrong, that the tree out front was her idea, that she picked the damn backsplash tile, that she'd hosted 10 Thanksgivings under that roof, that her son learned to ride a bike in that driveway, that she had bled in that kitchen, laughed in that hallway, cried in that shower. But none of that was title. She walked out of the records office in a fog. She made it to her car before the tears came. Not dramatic, movie screen sobs. Just a quiet, gutted unraveling. A soundless exhale of every illusion collapsing at once. All those years. The security. The assumptions. The way she mocked him for being so old school about paperwork. For tucking away forms in fireproof boxes. For being obsessive about deeds and names on documents. He hadn't been obsessive. He'd been aware. And she built a fantasy, painted it in good lighting, decorated it with sarcasm and entitlement. She mistook paperwork for passivity, mistook silence for weakness, mistook hours for mine. Now the gate didn't open. Now the house didn't answer. Now the courthouse confirmed, on paper, in public, that it was never hers. Not once. And that somehow hurt more than being left. Because she hadn't been left. She'd been written out a long, long time ago. The envelope arrived in silence. No knock. No doorbell. Just the soft thud of something sliding beneath the hotel room door as she stepped out of the shower, towel around her shoulders, skin still prickling from water that never quite felt warm enough anymore. At first, she assumed it was another summons. Or a final bill. Maybe one more legal document reminding her of what she no longer owned. But it wasn't a manila folder. It was a deep green envelope. No return address. Heavy stock. A single wax seal in the center, blood red, pressed with the Hallcroft family crest. 2 hawks and a torch. She sat down on the edge of the bed and opened it with a shaky thumb. Inside, a Christmas card. Glossy. Tasteful. Her ex-husband stood on the porch of the house she no longer had access to. Her son beside him, arms slung around his dad's shoulders. And to the right, Martin Hallcroft. Her father, holding a crystal glass of something amber, eyes smiling in a way she hadn't seen in years. All 3 of them were laughing. At peace. The kind of joy that can't be faked. Below the photo, in elegant cursive, "Thank you for the gift. We've moved on." Her throat closed. She dropped the card like it burned her. Another sheet fluttered free from the envelope. Legal paper. Stamped. It wasn't handwritten. It didn't need to be. Notice of disbursement reallocation, Hallcroft Family Trust. Effective date, December 26th. Per clause 14, D. Removal due to public dishonor and breach of familial code of conduct. All pending and future disbursements allocated to redacted Hallcroft shall be permanently redirected to beneficiary number 2 and beneficiary number 3, as named in Schedule B. This decision is final and binding, confirmed by trustee quorum. Her name, where it once lived, was now erased. Redacted. Not even worthy of bold font. Just gone. Replaced. She was once the heir apparent. The only daughter. The one who sat beside her father at company retreats. Who toasted alongside him during shareholder dinners. Who used to roll her eyes when he talked about legacy. And now? She wasn't legacy. She wasn't listed. She wasn't involved. She was excised. Quietly. Thoroughly. Not out of rage. Not out of vengeance. But because shame, public shame, was the one sin her father never forgave. And when she smirked in my living room, holding divorce papers like a Christmas present, giggling next to David like we were all in on the same joke, she handed Martin Hallcroft every excuse he needed to erase her with dignity. That was the thing. This wasn't revenge. This was extraction. Strategic. Clean. Surgical. She hadn't been defeated. She'd been removed. Not screamed at. Not ruined. Not litigated into dust. She was just done. No access to the trust. No claim on the estate. No house. No firm. No friends left to pick a side. And now, not even her own last name carried weight. The card sat on the carpet. The photo staring up at her. Her son grinning in the December sun, unaware, or maybe aware, that peace often comes after silence is weaponized. She didn't cry. There was nothing left to mourn. Only the quiet realization that the final blow hadn't come from her husband. It had come from her blood. The iron gate was still open when she arrived, tires crunching the gravel drive in short, staccato bursts. She didn't wait for anyone to greet her. She didn't knock. She pushed straight through the double doors of the Hallcroft estate like she had when she was 16, furious about a curfew. But this time, there was no teenage drama, no slammed doors. Just fury buried under humiliation, boiling, clawing, directionless. Her father's study was lit, as always. He never celebrated New Year's. Said it was for people who needed a symbolic reset. If you need a calendar to start over, he once told her, you're already behind. She found him exactly where she expected, at the long window, pouring tea into a small porcelain cup, hands steady. Same burgundy cardigan. Same stillness. Like the world hadn't burned down around them. She slammed the door behind her. You went too far. He didn't turn. No, you did. You erased me. I filed an update, he said plainly. Erasure requires malice. This was procedure. Her jaw trembled. You gave him the claws. He nodded once. 3 months ago, you let him destroy me. He didn't destroy you. He revealed you. She stepped forward. You chose him over me. Now he turned. Not angry. Not smug. Just old. And done. I didn't choose him, he said. I chose dignity. She blinked. He continued, placing the teapot back onto its tray with surgical precision. You mocked him for being quiet. For being steady. You joked about his passivity. About how easy it would be to gut the estate. I raised you to win with competence. not performance. Her voice cracked. You act like I betrayed you. You did. He snapped, sharper now, the only edge he'd shown in months. You thought this was about marriage. It was about the family, about what our name meant. You took your husband, who never once asked for credit, never once demanded recognition, and made him a joke, a tool, a weakness to exploit. You humiliated the man who helped carry this family's name with more grace than you ever learned. She clenched her fists. He's not blood. Her father stared at her, something cold flickering behind his eyes. No, he said. He's not. But when the storm came, he built a wall. You lit a match. She couldn't breathe. I was your daughter. He nodded slowly. And you still are? But that doesn't entitle you to immunity. She reached into her coat, pulled the Christmas card from her bag, and threw it onto his desk. That was cruel. He glanced at it. It was closure. Tears pricked at her eyes. You don't even regret it. I regret, he said carefully, that I didn't teach you sooner how expensive shame can be. The room fell silent. Outside, fireworks began to crack in the distance. Celebrations in neighboring towns. The new year had officially arrived. But in this house, there was no countdown. No party. Just porcelain cooling and the echo of a daughter realizing the war wasn't between her and her husband. It was between who she thought she was and who everyone had already stopped pretending she still could be. She turned to leave. At the door, she paused. One last try. You really believe he deserved all this? Her father didn't look at her, just sipped his tea. He never raised his hand, he said softly. He asked for nothing, until you took everything. And with that, she stepped into the hallway. The sound of her own footsteps following her out of the only room she was no longer allowed to belong in. Not because they hated her, but because the silence she mocked had done its job.